Well, today, as Matt said, we're kicking off a 4-week series, and this 4-week series is all focused on something that affects all of us, and that is relationships. But before I get into this, just want to let you know, this week, I got super sick this week, got a fever for a couple days, and I had to plan a sermon in the midst of not feeling good and having a fever, so I'm sitting at my desk, got the shivers and planning a sermon, and that was very hard for me to be fully there, and still I'm recovering from all of it today, and so I feel like my brain's half here, so this will potentially be the worst sermon you've ever heard. So this is your first time here, welcome. So glad that you chose to join us today. I want to kick off this, oh, by the way, if I get on a coughing fit this morning, they're going to run me out some water. I'll try to cover up my mic so I don't blow your ears out, but just want to let you know that. I want to kick off this sermon series by stating two truths we all know about relationships. And the first one is that relationships are powerful. Relationships are powerful because more than anything else, the people in our lives positively and negatively impact our lives. Relationships are powerful because our best and worst moments involved other people. Relationships are powerful because those closest to us determine the quality and the direction of our lives. Relationships are powerful because that's the way that God intended it. God never created us to live in isolation. He created us to know others and be known by others. It's why we long for meaningful, deep, intimate, authentic connections so much in our life. Relationships are powerful because God wants to transform you more into everything He's created you to be, and transformation doesn't happen in isolation. Relationships are powerful. We all know this, which is why we all want great relationships at home, at work, at school, within our church. And here's the second truth about relationships we all know. Relationships are hard. All you got to do is look at marriage to know that. Two people who couldn't love each other anymore stand up in front of their family and friends and dedicate their lives and loyalty and love to each other for the rest of their lives. And then so many times within a few years, those same two people end up hating each other, resenting each other, and getting divorced. And many who don't end up getting divorced just end up having a terrible relationship with one another from that point forward. Relationships are hard. They're hard at home, they're hard at church, they're hard at school, they're hard at work. It doesn't matter how much you love the other person, like the other person, or dedicated to the other person. Sooner or later, every relationship is hard. And the reason relationships are hard is because of one word, and that word is trust. And if you've been a part of Relevant for any period of time, you've heard me say this over and over again, that as trust goes, so goes the relationship. As trust goes, so goes the relationship with your spouse, with your kids, with your parents, with your friends, with your teammates, with those you're in T-Life groups with each other, with Jesus. Trust is at the epicenter of every good, healthy, and growing relationship, and a lack of trust is at the epicenter of every bad, unhealthy, dying relationship. For any relationship to flourish and thrive requires trust. You must trust them, and they must trust you. Where there is a lack of trust by one or both people, the relationship dies. Think about every relationship that you've ever had that went south. It won't take you long to realize that the reason it did was because there was a lack, a breach of, a loss of trust in the relationship. You stop trusting them, or they stop trusting you. As trust goes, so goes the relationship. Trust is the glue that mends the relationship together. Trust is the medicine that heals broken relationships. Trust is the currency that improves our current relationships. The reason that relationships are so hard is because trust is hard. Trust takes a ton of time to build. It takes a ton of time to grow, and trust can be lost in a moment. And the reality is that trust is built by trustworthy people. And we say this word trustworthy all the time, but do you know what the definition is? Well, the definition is actually in the word. To be trustworthy means to be worthy of trust. For trust to be built and flourish in any relationship requires two people being trustworthy. They must be worthy of trust, and you must be worthy of trust. And therein lies the problem in so many of our relationships. When it comes to trust, very rarely do we look at ourselves. Most often, we look at them. And when they break our trust, we're so quick to say, you can't be trusted. You're not trustworthy. But when we do something that breaks their trust, we plead our case why we are still trustworthy people. When it comes to being trustworthy, we look at them way more than we look at ourselves. So as we start the series, though, let me ask you, are you worthy of trust? Are you trustworthy? If trust is ever going to exist in any of your relationships, you must first look in the mirror and answer this question before you look at them. And that's what we're going to do throughout this series. Since we all want great relationships, throughout the series, we're going to look at 4 relational commitments that we must make to be trustworthy people. And the truth is, all four of these commitments are required from 2 people for a culture of trust to exist in a relationship. However, this series is not about them. So right now, don't go, I really wish they were here to hear this. This series is not about them. This series is about looking in the mirror at ourselves. You can't control if they're trustworthy or not, but you can control if you are, and you're 50% of every relationship that you have. Now, if you're not a follower of Christ, you not say you put your faith in Jesus, you're kind of wondering if even what's written in the Bible is true, I'm so glad you're here, and you need to know you don't have to apply anything we're talking about in this series. But you can apply it, even if you don't believe what's written in the Bible is true, and I think you should apply it because you want great relationships, and as trust goes, so goes the relationship. But for those of us who are followers of Christ, those of us who would say we've put our faith in Jesus by asking him to be the forgiver of our sins and the leader of our life, the stakes are so much higher. We must be trustworthy people, because if we're not, how will anyone ever trust the one whom we say we follow? Now, before I move on, I need a volunteer. And Jacob Petrick, I'm going to ask you, come on up here, Jacob, because I want a guy, I want a young guy. So Jacob, give it up for Jacob. Jacob, get up here. We cannot do a trust series without doing the trust fall. Hello, Jacob. Jacob is one of our YU students here. Jacob's going to be a senior this next year. Senior, right? Yeah, I always forget. Jacob, you know how this works. We play this all the stupid time at, team building. I'm sure you've done this at YU. And by the way, I didn't tell Jacob he was coming up here. I just wanted a young guy, because you are good looking. So we all know how with the trust fall works. I count to 3 and I say 1, 2, 3, and he falls backwards and I catch him and this builds trust. Yay! So let's try it. So Jacob, are you ready? All right, 1, 2, 3. Now, here's the deal when it comes to trust fall. You have to be they have to know that you're willing to catch them, because if you're not willing to catch them, the whole thing breaks down. So that was just to give everybody an understanding how it works. Like when the trust fall doesn't go right. All right, this time, buddy, there you go. This time I will catch you. Trust me. 1, 2, 3. And if you do it too many times and you don't catch them, right? Like what happens? They start going, I don't believe this guy is going to end up catching me. And so after 2 times of not catching, this is why I got a young guy, by the way. After 2 times of not catching him, Jacob's starting to go, we're going to do this again. He's not going to, I will catch you this time. That was to illustrate the fact that so this time I promise, I will catch you. All right, everyone ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. And you don't have to, it's okay. So now here's the deal. This is not a trick question. What's happening to his trust in me? Right? It's eroding. Every time I don't do what I promised I would do, every time I don't do what he expected me to do because I assured him that he can count on me, every time I didn't do what I said you can trust me to do, what he trusted me to do, I hurt him. And this hurt is eroding his trust in me. And as you know, over time, in real life, that could destroy a relationship. So give it up for Jacob. Good job, Jacob. Thanks for being a good sport. Here is the truth. Sooner or later, every person that you're in a relationship with, every single person that you are in a relationship with, your spouse, your parents, people you're in a small group with, your coworkers, your kids, will hurt you. They will hurt you. They will not come through. They will break a promise. They will say or do something hurtful. They will drop you. And when, not if, they do, trust has been broken. And our natural tendency, our natural inclination is to focus all of our attention on them, on the person who dropped us, and conclude they're not trustworthy, which may or may not be true. We'll get back to that a little bit later. And then wait for them to do something to restore your trust in them. But the reality is what we do after we're the ones who were dropped, what we do after we're the ones who are hurt, determines if we're trustworthy or not. What we do after we're the ones who are dropped, after we're the ones who are hurt, will help restore trust in the relationship or destroy it. So, what do we do to be trustworthy? What do we do to prove that we're trustworthy? What do we do to help restore trust within the relationship when someone hurts us, when someone drops us? Well, in Matthew 18, Jesus spoke directly into that. The New Testament book of Matthew is actually one of the four Gospels. It's one of the first four books of the New Testament called the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. All about the life of Jesus. And Matthew was written by Matthew. Super creative title to the book. Matthew was one of Jesus' 12 disciples. And in Matthew 18, we see that Jesus gathered his followers together to instruct them on some characteristics that should characterize how his followers should love and relate to one another, both now and in the future. And I'm going to camp out on just one statement that Jesus said in the midst of his teaching to them, because it is so, so powerful. And here it is. He said, if your brother or sister, and Jesus is referring specifically to other followers of Christ, to the church, but that can be applied, this can be applied, what he says can be applied to any relationship. If your brother or sister sins. Now, in other English translations, they add two words, of which the NIV, which I am reading out of, does not, because it's assumed. And the two words are, when your brother or sister sins against you, which means wrongs you, offends you, hurts you, violates you. Now, I want to stop here real quick. Because Jesus isn't talking about when someone physically or sexually is abusing you. That's a category of sin against you that's all its own and should be handled very differently than what Jesus says next, because that person is not safe and that person is not trustworthy. What Jesus is saying here is when your spouse, when your husband, when your wife, when your kids, when your parents, when your brother, when your sister, when your friend, when your boyfriend, when your girlfriend, when your fiance, when your coworker, when that someone in your small group wrongs you, hurts you, offends you, violates you, drops you, don't be surprised. Don't be shocked. You will hurt one another. Not because you want to, but because you're all broken people. But because you're all, as my followers, not perfect people, just forgiven by the grace of God people. So when you sin against one another, when you hurt one another, here is what I want you to do. And we already know what Jesus isn't going to say next. What he isn't going to say next is, bury it. Which is what we so often do. Oftentimes when someone hurts us, we bury the pain, anger, disappointment, and distrust it caused. We bury it, and before long, the poison of bitterness and resentment infects our hearts, and bitterness and resentment is so destructive. It's destructive to them. It's destructive to your relationship with them. It's destructive to your relationship because it prevents trust from existing in the relationship. Trust and bitterness cannot coexist. Trust and resentment cannot coexist. And it's destructive to you. Once bitterness and resentment seeps into your heart, you filter every thought, every feeling, and every relationship through it, and you become a very cynical person. So we know It's as if Jesus would say, listen, when someone hurts you, when someone sin against you, don't bury it. Because doing so is destructive to them, it's destructive to your relationship, it's destructive to you. And don't bury it because unresolved bitterness and unresolved anger and unresolved resentment will make you untrustworthy. Another thing we know Jesus isn't going to say is lash out, which is what some of us immediately do, which is my natural go-to. Oftentimes when someone hurts us, we lash out in anger at them. We yell. We say hurtful things to them. We ignore them. We mistreat them. We pick a fight with them. We're passive aggressive with them. We get obnoxious with them. And never once has that created anything good in a relationship. Never once has that fostered any trust in a relationship. All it's done is hurt our relationships and cause people not to trust us. The other thing we know Jesus isn't going to say next is when your brother or sister sins against you, talk about them to someone else. But come on, let's be honest. This is what we so often do. Oftentimes when someone hurts us, we talk negatively about them to someone who is neither directly part of the problem nor should be part of the solution. And that's called gossip. And gossip destroys them, destroys you, and destroys the relationship. King Solomon, who was an Israelite king who lived about 1,000 years or so before Jesus, and when he lived was known as the wisest person to have ever lived, said it this way. A perverse person stirs up conflict, and a gossip separates close friends. Gossip separates spouses, separates teammates, separates groups, separates churches, and the list goes on. Solomon, the wisest man to have ever lived, said gossip destroys relationships because it pushes two people away from one another. And you don't need the Bible to know that. You ever been gossiped about by someone? What happened in your relationship with the person who gossiped about you? It separated you, didn't it? Gossip has never improved any relationship, and gossip never has once restored any trust in a relationship. The only thing that gossip does is destroy them, is destroy the relationship, and destroy you because, don't miss this, gossip makes you not trustworthy. Gossip makes you not trustworthy. And we all know this. And yet we're all so guilty of it. So it's as if Jesus is saying, listen, when someone hurts you or someone sins against you, don't bury it. Don't lash out in anger against them. Don't gossip about them. Listen, that's how the rest of the world can react. That's how the rest of the world naturally acts. But not so with you. As one of my followers, as someone who has put their faith in me by asking me to be the forgiver of their sins and the leader of their life, and has accepted my sacrificial and undeserving love, mercy, grace, and forgiveness, here is how I want you to respond. If your brother or sister sins against you, because they will, and when that happens, here's what you should do. Go and point out their fault, their sin, their offense, their wrongdoing, their hurt, their violation against you, just between the two of you. So you're saying, listen, when someone hurts you, when someone sins against you, in order to create an avenue for relational reconciliation, to create an avenue for them to rebuild their trust, to create an avenue for you to prove that you're trustworthy, go talk directly to them about it. And here's why. If they listen to you, and here's the end goal, you have won them over. Bottom line, the first relational commitment that we must make to be a person worthy of trust is when you hurt me, when you sin against me, I will talk directly to you about it. When you hurt me, I'm committed to talk directly to you about it. And here's why this is so important. And here's why this is so powerful. Talking directly to them is how they know they have hurt you. It's how they know they have sinned against you. I don't know if it's because of my job, because I'm a pastor, because I have a lot of employees. I don't know, but people come to me all the time to tell me about how other people in the church have hurt them. And every time someone comes and tells me, the first question I ask is, have you talked to them about it? And more times than not, they go, no. And I go, why not? Why are you talking to me then? Before you say another word, go talk to them about it, because that's the only way they can do anything about it. It's the only way they can do what Jesus would have us do when we sin against one another, which is to listen and seek forgiveness and redemption and reconciliation. If they don't know what they did to hurt you, how can they not do it anymore? Going and talking directly to them about it, that's what brings clarity. This is what puts the ball in their court. This is what gives them the opportunity to do something about it. Listen to what I say next. Someone hurting you does not make them untrustworthy. Someone hurting you does not make them untrustworthy, because you will hurt others too, and they will hurt you. We all will hurt and sin against one another. What someone does after they know that they have sinned against you is what should grow or erode your trust in them. And how can they know if you don't talk directly to them about it? Here's another reason this is powerful. Talking directly to them is the best, maybe the only way, in Jesus' words, to win them over. After we talk directly to a person who has sinned against us, they listen and seek forgiveness and redemption and reconciliation, we know we have won them over. And only when we have won them over can the relationship be mended and healed. Only when we have won them over can the broken trust be rebuilt. But there's more. Talking directly to them proves you are trustworthy. And I'll come back to that in just a second. But first, I want to answer a question that I'm sure some of you are asking right now because of your experience in the past. And that is, well, what if they don't listen? What if they don't own it? What if they don't seek forgiveness? What do I do if I talk directly to them about how they have hurt me and they continue to sin against me in the same way over and over and over? They continue to drop me over and over and over. And Jesus knew that was a real possibility. If you continue to read in Matthew 18, and I would encourage you to do that this week on your own or in your T-Life group, Jesus said that if that happens, what we should do as one of his followers is go talk directly to them again and again and again. And if necessary, take people with us who are trustworthy, wise, and respected, who can help be part of the solution, who can mediate with wisdom and speak unbiased truth to them and to you with grace, who can help facilitate forgiveness, reconciliation, and redemption between the two of you. And if after all that they still refuse to listen and seek forgiveness, redemption, and reconciliation, they have proven themselves a person who is unworthy of trust, and you should not continue to trust someone who is not trustworthy. A person who continues to hurt you, who continues to sin against you in the same way over and over and over again after you have gone and talked directly to them over and over and over again without remorse, without reconciliation, without taking next steps to prevent it, is not trustworthy. And unfortunately, you will not be able to have a good and healthy relationship with them until that changes, because as trust goes, so goes the relationship. So you need to decide what your relationship with them looks like going forward. But come on, this isn't about them. This isn't about what they do. This isn't about what they don't do. We can't control them. This is about us. Jesus was instructing us as his followers what to do when we're the ones who were sinned against, when we're the ones who were dropped. And what he instructs us to do is to make the commitment that when you hurt me, I will talk directly to you about it over and over again if necessary. And here's why. Here's the big idea for the day. Talking directly to someone who has hurt you proves that you're someone worthy of trust. Talking directly to someone who has hurt you proves you're trustworthy. It proves you can be trusted not to bury it. It proves you can be trusted not to let the poison of bitterness and resentment infect your heart and your mind toward them. It proves you can be trusted not to lash out in anger. It proves you can be trusted not to gossip about them. It proves you can be trusted with the relationship. It proves you can be trusted that you want to forgive them. It proves you can be trusted that you care about the relationship and want to do everything that you can to reconcile. It proves that you can be trusted that you want to restore trust in them. It proves you can be trusted to be honest. It proves you can be trusted to seek clarity and understanding. It proves you can be trusted with their heart. It proves you can be trusted that you're reliable. It proves that you can be trusted with their trust. It proves that you truly want to follow Jesus. Talking directly to someone who has hurt you proves you're someone worthy of trust. Matt Paddock, who was one of our pastors here, he was just up here earlier hosting. Matt and I have worked together for over 10 years now, which means we've hurt each other a lot. Like, you can't work this closely together for that long and just not hurt each other a lot. And years ago, when Matt and I were younger and less gray than we are now, we weren't very good at this. We weren't very good that when we hurt one another, coming and talking directly to one another. When we hurt one another, we would lash out against one another. I actually can remember a meeting that Matt and I were in that we got fired up at each other. It was a leadership team meeting, so the room is full of people. And Matt and I, in the middle of that meeting, are bumping chests, screaming in each other's face, which made everyone real comfortable in the room. Now, over the years, Matt and I have matured. Over the years, Matt and I have been more transformed to who God's created us to be, and we've become much better at this. We become much better at talking directly to one another when we hurt one another. As a matter of fact, Matt is really, really, really good at it. I can remember a couple years ago, I was doing something I didn't realize I was doing, and I didn't realize that what I was doing was actually hurting Matt and hurting some of his team members. And so Matt said, "Hey, Ronnie," he pointed it out, and he asked me, he said, "Would you just not do that anymore? Just, hey, would you please not do that?" Dude, yeah, man, I promise I won't do that again. And then I did it again. And Matt understandably was mad. And he was hurt because I promised I would not do it again. And do you know what Matt did? He knocked on my door Monday morning. He said, "Hey, can I talk to you real quick?" I was like, "Yeah." And Matt directly told me what I did again that I promised I wouldn't do, and how it hurt him, and how it hurt other people. And man, I was just broken. And obviously, I profusely just apologized to him. And then I fired him. No, I was kidding. Do you know what that did to my trust in Matt? By Matt coming and telling me? Because I was the one who hurt him. I was the one who hurt others. But when he came and told me directly about it, do you know what it did to my trust in him? It grew my trust in him exponentially. It proved he was trustworthy. I knew I could trust Matt not to talk about me to other people behind my back. I knew I could trust Matt to have my back. I knew that Matt cared and valued our relationship, not just our work relationship. Talking directly to someone who has hurt us, it's so basic. It's relationship 101. And we all know it. Yet so many of us are slow to do it, and some of us are completely resistant to do it. As I said earlier, whenever someone tells me how someone else has hurt them, and I immediately suggest they do this, more times than not, I hear excuses of why they can't and why they won't. But if I'm being honest, I'm slow to do it, and I'm resistant to do it at times. I don't know how many times I've said to myself, I know I should, maybe later, but not now. And that has done nothing good ever in any of my relationships. The reason I think that we're slow, the reason I think we're resistant, is because very few of us like conflict. When we think about talking directly to someone who has hurt us, we immediately think about the fighting, the tension, the argument, the battle, the showdown, the conflict that it can result in, and none of us want to experience that. Listen, talking to someone, directly to someone who has hurt you, does not need to result in conflict, and more times than not, it won't if you do it in a healthy, God-honoring, relationship-building way. And I want to close by just giving you a few suggestions on how to do that. And I can't guarantee you'll avoid all conflict by doing what I'm going to suggest, because you can't control how another person responds. But I can guarantee not taking these suggestions will more than likely lead to a confrontation, will lead to a fight when you go talk directly to them. The first thing is go quickly. Go quickly. When someone hurts you, chances are you're going to be angry. And it's okay to be angry. It's natural to feel angry, but it's not okay to sin in your anger. It's not okay to let the anger you feel inside set you off on the outside. It's not okay to lash out in anger. You may feel better for a minute when you do, but all it does is hurt them, hurt the relationship, and hurt you. When someone hurts you, after you stop seeing red, which I usually wait 24 hours, go quickly and talk to them. Go quickly and talk to them. Texts don't count. Texts are not relationship building. Don't ever do this through texts, you coward. Go talk quickly to them. Secondly, fight for the relationship. When you go talk to them, when you go talk directly to someone who hurts you, you will fight for one of two things. You will fight for one of two things. You will either fight to be right, or you will fight for the relationship. And unfortunately, you can't fight for both. You can't fight for both. If the purpose of you go talking to them is to talk at them to prove you're right and they're wrong, you're prideful. And your pride is probably worse than the hurt they caused you to begin with. When you go talk directly to them, fight for the relationship. Fight to restore the relationship. Fight for restoration, not to make a point, not to be right. The more they feel like you care about them, the more they feel like you care about the relationship, the more receptive they will be. Third, embody the fullness of grace and truth. Embody the fullness of truth by being direct, straightforward, clear, and truthful about how they hurt you. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't beat around the bush because you're worried about them, hurting their feelings. And don't over-exaggerate it either. Embody and speak the fullness of truth and embody the fullness of grace. Don't try to manipulate them. Don't be obnoxious. Don't be there just to speak truth at them. Embody the fullness of grace. Grace communicates, I'm here to listen to what you have to say. I'm here because I love you. I'm here believing the best about you. I'm here because I want to forgive you. I'm here for the relationship. Embody the fullness of grace because at some point you'll need and you'll want someone to give grace to you. And I give out a lot of grace because I want a lot of grace when I sin against someone. And you're going to want a lot of grace when you sin against someone. We'll talk about that next week. When you and I go directly to someone who has hurt us, we should not try to figure out the balance of grace and truth. We should instead do everything to embody the fullness of both, because that's what Jesus did. The Apostle John wrote this about Jesus. The Word, Jesus, became flesh and made his dwelling among us. Why? Not to be right, but to redeem us back into a relationship with our Heavenly Father, that our violation of sin against him broke. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Jesus' approach was not the balance of grace and truth, but the fullness of both. Jesus was all truth and all grace all the time. I believe it's one of the reasons that Jesus was so irresistible. I believe it's one of the reasons that being in the presence of Jesus was so transformational. When someone sins against you and you go talk directly to them, you want them to listen, right? When someone sins against you and you go talk directly to them, you want to win them over. and heal and mend and reconcile the relationship, right? Well, if so, our best approach is Jesus' approach. Our best approach is to embody the fullness of grace and truth. This is how we love one another just as Jesus first loved us when we sin against one another. Which leads us to the final thing I want to encourage you to do after you go talk directly to someone who has hurt you. And that is forgive fully. Regardless if they own it or not, regardless if they listen or not, regardless if you have won them over or not, regardless if they seek reconciliation or not, regardless if they ask for it or not, forgive them fully, just as God fully forgave you for your violation of sin against him the moment you put your faith in Jesus. Forgive them not because they are forgivable. Forgive them not because they deserve it. Forgive them not because you fully trust they won't hurt you again. Forgive them because as a follower of Christ, you have been forgiven. This is the only reason you should forgive them. And this is the reason why as followers of Christ, we must forgive them. And depending on the hurt that they caused you, this will be very hard for some of you. And I know some of you have said that you've forgiven that person. You said you've forgiven them. But you still have bitterness and resentment toward them. You still want to lash out at them. You still want to gossip about them. You haven't forgiven them. And your unforgiveness is hurting you. Your unforgiveness is now making you not trustworthy. Listen, if you have the poison of bitterness and resentment and anger in your heart because of the hurt that someone caused you, you may need help processing it so that you can forgive and be free of all of that. And this is why we do Fresh Start here at Relevant. And if you have that poison in your heart, I would encourage you to sign up and go through Fresh Start. You can go on the app, on the website, the Next Step area, find information about that, because you want to be free of all that. You got to be able to forgive. But for some of us, because of the hurt that was caused, that requires a little bit more processing. The first relational commitment that we must make to be a person worthy of trust is when you hurt me, when you sin against me, I will talk directly to you about it. So let me ask you, who has hurt you that you need to talk to? Who has hurt you that you need to talk to? Whoever it is, go talk directly to them. Go talk directly to them so that they know that they have hurt you and how they have hurt you. Go talk directly to them because it's the best, maybe the only way, in Jesus' words, to win them over. Go talk directly to them so that the relationship can be mended and broken trust can be restored. Go talk directly to them, embodying the fullness of grace and truth, because talking directly to someone who has hurt you proves you're someone worthy of trust. Let me pray for us. Dear Lord, this is much easier said than done. And I know as I asked who has hurt you that you need to talk to, I know for many of us someone came to our mind, and you want us to take this step that you instruct us to take. And so I pray that we prove we're trustworthy people, and we take that step, and we take it quickly. We take it fighting for the relationship. We take it embodying the fullness of grace and truth. And we take it wanting to forgive fully. And Lord, I pray that as we take this, not only do we prove we're trustworthy people, but Lord, I pray that broken relationships are healed. Mended relationships are restored. Pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.